Well, hi, hello there. My name is John Manning, and I'd like to talk to you about what I learned in my Corinthians class. It's very important we talk about the location of Corinth. See, Corinth is on an isthmus, which in Greek means neck.
The man is the head, but the woman is the neck.
So it turns the head, okay? And why it was so important is because before, merchants would have to sail their cargo all the way around to the other side. And it was very dangerous. And what the tyrant Periander came up with is this kind of a railway. We call it the Daulicus Railway. And what they did is they would unload all their cargo on carts, and they would take it over to the other side, which was only a 4-mile strip of land, and they would unload their cargo there. And so what that did is it created a spot for merchants and philosophers and all kinds of stuff, and also idol worship, and which created great immorality, which became a great place for Paul to plant a church. And so Paul planted the church, and as people do, is they create their own philosophies. And so Paul left, and then next thing you know, he has to deal with the issues, and that's exactly what Corinthians was about. Douglas A. Campbell in his article wrote, Paul wrote his first letter to the Corinthians, now lost, in the fall of 50 CE. The Corinthians pushed back quite hard. They wrote a reply to Paul with a number of questions in the spring of 51 CE. He wrote a long letter back, which is our First Corinthians. So why would Paul need to write these letters? I mean, after all, they were the first church. They were the early church. You know, just like we keep on saying, we need to get back to the early church because they were great Christians, right? In fact, they're probably more messed up than we are today. The Bible Project video states that Corinthians can be divided into 5 issues. The issue of division, the issue of sex, the issue of food, the gathering, and the resurrection. And then 2 Corinthians was written after what Paul called the painful visit in 2 Corinthians chapter 2. He addressed the reconciliation, the lack of generosity, in the dealing with other people who came in preaching and bad-mouthing Paul that he called the super apostles. I like that name. It's actually pretty cool. And so Paul had to deal with a lot of just bad philosophy that came about by what a lot of them would call their freedom. So some of the things that was happening is the division, specifically division. There was factions that were going on, and some would say that they were followed Paul's teaching, Apollos' teachings, and Cephas' teaching, and so there's these divisions that were coming up, and so Paul had to address that, and then Paul had to address this pretty nasty sexual thing going on that they were touting, they were boasting about that was going on in the church because they were like, hey, we're free, we can do whatever we want. And so Paul had to address the sexual immorality of that. And then there was issues between brothers that were coming against each other and taking each other to court. And Paul had to address that issue. And then there was the issue of idol worship and food and the freedom to be able to eat idol foods that were offered to idols. And Paul had to address that issue. And then they also had to address the issue when they were gathered together. I mean, they were taking communion improperly, which I think kind of came from the division group, you know, like they were saying, I'm from Paul, I'm from Cephas, all this kind of stuff, and we're not dealing with you, we're going to have our own communion. And I think that might be one of the things too, not necessarily fact, but that was my opinion. And then they were talking about the worship gathering, you know, and you know, I'm down with every once in a while, you know, good flag waving and stuff like that, but it's what it sounds like is they were just using their spiritual gifts all at the same time, speaking in tongues, prophesying at the same time, cutting people off. I mean, it's kind of like a worship leader trying to talk to his vocalist while the drummer and the guitar player are there. Anyway. But what I think is is in the end, both letters really come down to this, is that we are people of the resurrection, redeemed by Jesus, and we need to be generous with our love for one another like Christ has loved us, putting others first before ourselves. And man, that sounds really familiar.